In this video, we're going to learn about ways that we can have our program repeat the same instructions over and over again. And this is more commonly referred to as a loop. So upon completion of this video, I'd like you to complete the Part 3 video quiz. And while we're on Schoology, you need to download this example text.txt file as a starter file for this project. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and then there's a download file button in the top left. Click that. It's going to download into your downloads folder or wherever your default directory is. I'm going to say show in folder here, and then I'm just going to open up this file. I can use any plain text editor, and all of our computers in the computer lab have Notepad++ on them. So I'm going to open it up in this, and simply what I'm going to do is I'm going to push Control A to select all the text, and I'm just going to right click and say copy. And I really don't need this file anymore. The next thing I'm going to do is start a new project, and on the start page of Visual Studio you can just click New Project and select Visual C# in the upper left, then click Console Application here in the center, and then down here, this is really important, name this application Loops. And then for a location, select either your desktop or your My Documents folder by clicking the Browse button and then click OK. I've already had this application open, so the next step here is to paste that text into a new class. And to do that, you're going to select Loops over here, right click on it, and then slide down to where it says Add. And then we're going to add a new item and select Class right here in the pop-up window. And we'll give it a name of Example Text. Here I'm capitalizing the E and the T in these two words, and then I'm going to click Add. Now I'm going to select all the text that's in here, and I'm going to paste over top of that all of the text that I just selected in our downloaded file. And I'm going to click Save. All right, what we're going to do with this is we're going to use loops to search through this text and count how many characters there are of any given character that we want to know about. Now we can close this file, and basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paste in a couple of things that are going to set up our program. So let me explain what these things are. The first thing is I'm going to create a variable called myText, and it's a string, and what it is it's holding all of that text from that file that we just put into our program. All of the words, all of the characters, everything. And it just stores it as one giant string, one giant, think of it as a very long sentence of text. And on the second line here, we're going to break it apart into individual characters, whether that be punctuation or white space or a comma, a period, whatever. We're going to break apart every single character into an individual character array. So that's a lot of characters. And then we're going to loop through that array and count them up and find out like how many A's there are, how many B's there are, how many C's there are. And we're going to ask the user to pick what character that they want to count. And that'll add some randomness to this that it creates a little bit of variation here and make a variable out of it. So we're going to ask that the user to enter a character, and we're going to store that character as a variable called car1. All right, so let's start making our first loop. The first kind of loop I'm going to introduce to you is called a for loop, and it's named so because that's the keyword that we're going to begin with. So we're going to start with for, and inside of parentheses we have to put three things. The first thing is called the control variable, and the control variable will only happen once during the loop, and I'm going to create an integer called I. So I is a new variable, and it's going to start or hold the value of 0 during this loop. So at the beginning of the loop, I is 0. But while the loop is going on, we're going to constantly test to see if I is less than myArray.length. And myArray.length is a number. All right, so this actually returns a number, which is how many total characters are in this character array up here. So if it's 5,000, it would say here I is less than 5,000. If this is true, then the loop will continue, and if it's false, the loop will not continue. All right, now I'm going to put another semicolon after length, and then I'm going to say I++. And what this third thing does is it constantly is increasing the size of I by 1 every time the loop finishes one repetition, which is called an iteration. All right, so I'm going to add some curly braces. So this is the beginning of the loop right here, and down here this is the end of the loop. At any point, if this condition right here is false, this loop will exit and the program will continue executing statements right here on line 23 after the curly brace. Okay, so inside of these curly braces, I'm going to add a little if statement. And I'm going to say if my array at element I, so whatever current character we're examining, double equals car1, then with a set of curly braces, I'm going to increment the count. And that's all we're going to do in the loop, is we're just counting how many characters match whatever the user picked. And then I'm going to give some output here. So console.writeLine. And I'm going to use a \n. This is called an escape character, and this would add a new line to the previous line. So basically, this is like a carriage return, or if you hit enter on the keyboard, it's the same thing. So there are space, and then I'm going to concatenate the number that count is holding, so whatever that happens to be. I'm going to convert that to a string, and then I'm going to also concatenate onto that a space and then another escape character, so a \quote and another quote. So here I have two quotes next to each other. In order to put a quote within a quote, you have to escape it. So this little escape sequence is going to put a quote inside of a quote. And then I'm going to put the variable car1 here, and then I'm going to concatenate one more time. Inside of this, I'm going to put another escape quote, and then an S, and then I'm going to say in the text, period, end quote, and a semicolon at the end. So that's a whole lot of concatenation on there. Let me go ahead and close the toolbox because we don't need it in this console app. And that'll allow you to see a little bit more. And I can close this window as well. All right, at this point, let's go ahead and run this program by clicking the debug menu and say start without debugging. And it says enter a character to search for in the text. Let's just find the letter A. There are 405 A's in the text. Press any key to continue. All right, so it just scanned through that file and counted every single one of them. If you got the same result, you've done it correct. All right, so this is a for loop. The next kind of loop that I want to introduce you to is a for each loop. And this one's a little bit different. But basically, I'm going to reuse this code up here, and I'm going to reuse this variable, but I don't need to redeclare it. So I'm going to copy this, and next up, I'm going to just paste this in here and change car1 to car2, and I'm just going to take out where it says int, which resets the count. Up above here, I'm going to add a little note. So let's do this. I'm going to add a whole bunch of notes here, like this. And I'm going to copy this line. And I'm going to put in here that this is a for each loop example. Just so that you can see that we're in a completely another section here. All right, a for each loop will examine a type of data within whatever you're searching, and for every occurrence of that, you can do something. So this one starts with for each as a single word, and then in parentheses, I'm going to say, I'm going to look for every character that I'm going to call C in my array. And within this, I'm going to make a similar condition to above. So if C double equals car2, then I'm going to count up. All right, and let's go ahead and just copy this line right here and put it below our for each loop and just change car1 to car2. And let's try it again. And we should have the same result twice. So under the debug menu, I'm going to click start without debugging. You can also push Control F5. And here, let's look for the letter A again. So here there's 405 A's in the text. If I search for it again, the for each loop finds the exact same thing. So I wanted to show you here that whether we use a for loop or a for each loop, these are functionally equivalent. There is really no difference in how they perform or how they can be used. Either one would be fine. It's a matter of preference. All right, the next type of loop that we're going to look at here is called a while loop. So let me copy this. And I'm just going to change for each to while. All right, and we're also going to reuse this code right here. And I'm going to put it right here, but this is going to be car3 in this example. And for a while loop, you need to create the control variable before you create the loop. So I'm going to make another variable, and I'm going to call it control variable. So this variable's job is to oversee the loop and make sure that it's not going to become an infinite loop. So int control variable is going to hold the value of 0. And then I can say while control variable is less than my array dot length, and then within these curly braces, this is our loop. So once again, I'm going to say if, and then in this case, I'll say my array at element control variable double equals car3 count plus plus. Now, since I had to create the control variable ahead of time, I also need to change it in this loop. So here I'm going to say the control variable is going to go up every time this loop iterates, every time it repeats. So here I need to put this in here. So a little bit more wordy, but the advantage of a while loop is that each of these for loops up here could always be turned into a while loop. So when in doubt, you could always create a loop using just a while keyword. You don't need to use a for loop. And in some cases, it's not possible perhaps to use a for loop or a for each loop. So you're going to have to create a while loop. All right, so let's try this out and see if that works. we also need to have our output here. So let me go ahead and copy this and paste it below and just change that to car 3. Save it and run it without debugging. All right, so let's look for the letter A again. There's 405 in the first loop. In the second loop, it also found 405. And in the third loop, it found 405. All right, the final kind of loop that I'm going to show you is called a do-while loop. And we'll do something different here. So right below this, I'm just going to change that to say do loop example. And in this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a console key. And I'm going to call it key. So this is a variable called key, and it's of the data type console key. And I'm going to begin my loop with do, and I'm going to end it with while key is not equal to console key dot y. All right, so there's a couple of differences here. First of all, a do loop will always execute at least one time. So it's going to do all of this and then check the condition at the end. So anytime that you want to at least do the loop once and then possibly repeat, this is a good option. And inside of this, I'm just going to put two things. I'm going to put console.writeLine, and then I'm going to put an escape n. I'll say press Y if you would like to end the loop. And then I'm going to give key a value, which is why it's underlined below. So key is going to hold the value of console.readKey dot key. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this out, and you'll see that this is also known as an indefinite loop. We don't know how many times this is actually going to iterate, whereas these are more definite loops. Up here we know exactly how many times it's going to iterate because it's always going to iterate to be the length of this array. It's finite. But this one will be determined by the user. So it's an indefinite loop. We don't know how many times the user's going to take before they actually push Y. So I'm going to go ahead and start without debugging, and we'll get through our first 3 examples. And then as long as I'm not pushing a key on the keyboard that is the Y key, this loop will continue. So let me go ahead and push Y, and there you can see it says press any key to continue, which means it's exited the program. Okay, so those are your 4 kinds of loops here, and the next thing is I'd like you to go back to Schoology and answer the questions in the Part 3 video, and then I have a little challenge for you to complete.